It's Black History Month, and welcome to the Washington Informer newspaper's digital broadcast program, WIN TV. I'm your host, Denise Rollard Barnes, publisher of the Washington Informer. And I hope you've had a chance to pick up your copy of the Washington Informer. This is this week's issue. It's available on newsstands now, so make sure you go out and get a copy. If you're not sure where to get it, you can read the paper online at www.washingtoninformer. I love saying those W's, WashingtonInformer.com. You can read it online, but for those of you who are like me and you just want to turn pages, you can go on the website to find a location near you and pick up a copy of the Washington Informer. We are distributed to over close to 600 locations in DC, Maryland, and Virginia. So you don't want to miss out. And we would love to have you as a regular reader of the Washington Informer, now in its 58th year, talking about a Black history moment, started in 1964 by my beloved father, Dr. Calvin W. Rolark. And so we've been serving the Washington community, as I said, for 58 years. Included in this week's issue are Black History Month highlights on environmental justice and the Black vote, as well as information on some of the events taking place this month. And you can also, as I said, read the digital edition at WashingtonInformer.com. Now, if you're watching on Facebook, I have to say this every week, go ahead and hit share so your followers can see the broadcast. This is a place where, as my daddy used to say, we want Lottie Dottie and everybody to show up and watch the show. If you are watching on Twitter as well, be sure to follow us and we will follow you back. And be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel at Washington Informer TV. That's one word, no spaces, Washington Informer TV. We've got, I think, a very interesting and informative show, as we try to do every week. But we have some great guests, and I wanted to just say that I look forward to speaking with all of them and sharing some information and news you can use. We'll be talking with Marcia Griffin, founder and president of Home Free USA, a company that partners with local government to help keep families in their homes and offers programs to help those interested in purchasing a new home or building their credit and to maximize down payments. You don't want to miss Marcia Griffin. I call her the guru of Black home ownership or home ownership in general, particularly in the DC area, but her conferences are national. She travels to different cities and does conferences, and her goal is the goal of not only our mayor, but others, even before it was stated, is to make sure that we build a legacy, that we build equity, and that we increase the amount of Black home ownership in this country. Also, we have John A. Allen, a Wells Fargo regional bank president for the District of Columbia and Maryland, who's also here to help us get our finances in order and to find a better way of managing our spending and, most importantly, our saving. With the nation also reacting to the violent police beating of 29-year-old Tyre Nichols, who was laid to rest this week at the hands of Memphis police, we will have a conversation that will include Washington Informer reporter Sam P.K. Collins. We're going to have in that conversation at-large council member Kenya McDuffie, who would like to see federal reforms for policing, and the number of complaints against the police officers in the District of Columbia has decreased by 4% last year, according to the annual report released in November by the DC Office of Police Complaints. So we're honored to have with us Michael Tobin, who is the agency executive director of the Office of Police Complaints, to talk to us about those numbers and to give us all information on what we should do if we encounter unpleasant or illegal or whatever we may believe encounters with DC police. So before we bring our guests on, let's watch our weekly news broadcast by Curtis Knowles.
This is WIN TV News, bringing you the news that matters. 3 EMTs who responded to the fatal beating of Tyre Nichols were fired Monday after an internal investigation from the Memphis Fire Department. Robert Long, Jamichael Sandridge, and Lieutenant Michelle Whitaker were found to have violated multiple department policies and protocols in their patient response to Nichols on January 7th. The fire department said, quote, "Our investigations have concluded that the two EMTs responded based on the initial nature of the call, a person pepper sprayed, and information they were told on the scene and failed to conduct an adequate patient assessment of Mr. Nichols." TikTok CEO Shouzi Chu will appear before Congress in March to field questions about the viral video security measures amid mounting efforts to ban it because of privacy concerns. Chu will appear at a March 23rd hearing at the House Energy and Commerce Committee in his first time testifying before Congress. Lawmakers will question him on TikTok's consumer privacy and data security practices, the platform's effect on children, and the app's relationship with the Chinese Communist Party. TikTok, which is owned by the Chinese company ByteDance, has come under increased scrutiny after media reports showed possible security breaches. Last month, President Biden signed legislation banning TikTok on government devices as well. Several lawmakers are supporting legislation to ban the app from the U.S. entirely. President Biden on Monday informed Congress that it will end the twin national emergencies for dealing with the coronavirus pandemic on May 11th. The move to end the national emergency and public health emergency comes as scientific and medical experts say Americans are learning to live with the virus. The pandemic was declared by then President Donald Trump in March of 2020, and since taking office in 2021, Biden has consistently extended the emergencies. Biden's move would restructure the federal coronavirus response to treat the virus as an endemic threat to public health that can be managed through agencies and normal authorities. Additionally, the president's directive would shift the development of vaccines and treatments away from the federal government.
Thank you so much, Curtis. So like I said, I'm excited to bring Marcia Griffin on with us, who is the founder and CEO of Home Free USA. But before doing so, let's take a look at this video.
It never hurts to have someone else have your back. And so that's what Home Free had for me. They had my back. I went in as a single individual. And so as a single individual, it was nice to have someone else vetting things, looking over things, making sure I was in the right direction and not being taken advantage of or anything of that nature. Owning a home is a lot of work, but the reward in the long run pays off.
Trying to get it all together here. Welcome, Marcia. How are you?
Thank you. And thank you for the video. Look, I haven't even seen that video myself. So that is really, really good, Denise. I must say, so that one focuses on home buying, but I definitely want our viewers and our audience to know that in Home Free USA, our focus is on home buyers, renters, homeowners who just have concerns about keeping their home. Anybody that just has anyone that has any sorts of financial concerns, need answers, need some advice, that's why we're here. Obviously, homeownership is the underpinning of everything that we do.
I'm so glad to hear that. And before we get in deep into questions, give us a little background on you and why you established Home Free USA.
Well, look, we've been in business for a while. So this is an entrepreneurial process. I established Home Free USA 28 years ago. We now have 58 other nonprofit organizations that are under our umbrella, so to say. And look, I created Home Free USA because I really felt that there was a need to bring banks like Wells Fargo and other banks and other independent mortgage companies and corporate executives 28 years ago, and we're still talking about this, to bring the two together with communities of color, largely in a situation where everybody wins, where where loans can get approved, where homeowners can be helped, where the banks can get loans that they not only can approve, but will sustain. We are with folks until they get into a home and also afterwards. So we're a resource for anyone dealing with financial issues, homeownership issues, and the like for the life of our relationship.
It seems like, Marcia, that the COVID pandemic was yesterday. We're acting like it was yesterday to some extent because we've taken our masks off. We're no longer social distancing and we're out and about. But the financial or economic impact still exists. And tell me, what did you see during the last couple of years where people who should have needed your help? I mean, I know that they had moratoriums on evictions, other things that really sort of put people at risk of losing their homes. What did you witness during this last 2 years?
Essentially, Denise, people were stressed out. They were afraid. They didn't know who to turn to. Obviously, COVID really created some unforeseen challenges for most of us in business and
Yes.
for our homeowners and home buyers. Some of that still persists because there's unemployment tends to be increasing a little bit. The housing supply right now is down. So even people who can get approved to buy a home, you can't even find anything that is affordable. So when we talk about average, everyday people who are trying to do better, it's hard. And as in life, we need a helping hand. Everyone needs someone to give them objective answers and advice about, well, what should I do about this? I mean, I just talked to someone just recently whose parents left the children the home, and the children are not sure of how to finagle all of this, who should buy it, and they really don't have the money to go to a lawyer. Now, we're not a lawyer at all, but at least we know the mortgage process. We can settle people down. And as a nonprofit organization, our job in Home for USA is to be of service to the public. We are not a realtor. We're not a lender. We will prepare you so when you get to them, you're going to be able to do well. You'll know the questions to ask. And also, we may even be a part of the call with you, which we do a lot of with homeowners many of whom are still in distress. Either they've lost a job, marriage, sickness, just whatever it is. So when homeowners have an issue and they call us, my homeownership advisors, who are very, very steeped in financial and mortgage issues, can sort of be the go-between, if you will, between the mortgage company and the borrower. And actually, we do that also on the home buying side to make sure that a person gets to being approved. 96% of all of the people that we work with, all of the renters, home buyers that we work with, get approved. But we want to make sure that not only do they get approved, but that they get a closing. And then when they get to closing, they can keep those homes. So that's why the relationship with us is so important.
Well, over 90%, that's truly a success story. And those who actually took that step to reach out to Home for USA are probably celebrating as well. I want to ask, though, about challenges, because you talked about the unaffordability of housing, in the district, or in other areas. I mean, housing has become very expensive. But what are some of the things that you see that are challenges that potential home buyers face that are within their control? What is it that I can do if I wanted to buy a home, prepare myself to be in the best possible place? And there's another tweak to that question. Since we are going to have Wells Fargo on in a few minutes, what do you think? I mean, is there still discrimination or any of the legacies of the past still existing that impact particularly Black homeowners that you witnessed and you would love to see erased that might help them? So I've asked two separate questions, and I hope you can get to them.
Great. The questions are excellent. Number one, let's just speak to the challenges that most home buyers have. Down payment money. This is a big issue. Credit is often an issue, but even if the credit is fine, which leans to in the high 600 credit score, 700 credit score, but our job is to work with you even if you've got a 500 credit score to get it up. But the bottom line is, even if your credit is good, the average person needs particularly in our area where rents are so high, you've got kids. I mean, just the cost of living is exorbitant. The bottom line, people need down payment money, and that is something that we seek with the lenders that we work with, and we do work with Wells Fargo. They're a great company. I must say we work with all of the major lenders and independent mortgage companies really around the country. Down payment money, help with credit issues, no question, trying to find direction on trying to find a home, working with your realtor that you can afford. And let me not say motivation, because so often, Denise, we just get stuck. You know, you
Right.
just get tired of just moving forward and going 5 steps forward and then 8 steps back, you know, on and on.
Exactly.
You just say, look, let me just stay where I am. But staying where we are, particularly if staying where we are is not comfortable, is not safe, is not good for your kids. If, look, we all want to do better in life. We just need a helping hand to do better. And that is why I started Home for USA. We need to talk to people who have gone through the process. But I want to say, despite all else, where there's a will, there's a way. And you may start small, you may have to crawl first, but look, the bottom line is that you want to crawl, but at some point, we have to get you so that you can run to the home that you really, really love. And at the end of the day, let's be real. Any renter is already paying a mortgage. You're just
Pretty
paying
much. You're right. Exactly.
That's just the bottom line.
Right, right.
In the areas where, these inner cities where we live, look, rents are so doggone high. It's hard to even save a dime, let alone saving, you know, $5,000-$10,000 for down payment money. So that leads me into your next
So
question.
what I'm going to stick a pin there, because I
Okay.
know we're going to get you back, and we may talk a little bit more about that, because I know that Secretary HUD and some other Secretary Fudge out of HUD is you know, working on legislation. There's always things going on in the Congress about, you know, how to make really activate the fair housing laws and what have you. So I'll save that for another conversation because of time. But I would just, in closing, can you just tell me how can people reach out to you?
Great. Our website is www.home, HOMEFREE, USA.org. We are a nonprofit.
Okay.
So that's really the best way. And in fact, your viewers can go on our website and register for a free homeownership consultation.
Wonderful.
Renter, a home buyer, or a homeowner. Free homeownership consultation, no obligation, no cost. Just have to register on our website. And we're at 301-891-8400.
Marcia Griffin, thank you so very much for being with us today and sharing this great information. We want you back. I want to make this a regular conversation, because what you do is what we want to help our community to do, and that is to become comfortable and safe, home safe as well. So thank you for joining us today.
My pleasure.
All righty. We're going to jump over now to John Allen, who is the Region Bank President for Wells Fargo in the District of Columbia, who's going to help us to figure out how we get organized in our process of just living, right? John, how are you?
Absolutely. I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. I see in the notes we're going to talk about tax season. Did I forget to mention that? Yes, it's right up on us. So, you know, tell us basically what you do there at Wells Fargo for this area, for the region.
Absolutely. So I have overall responsibilities for all of the District of Columbia in Maryland, including and inclusive of Baltimore. I'm responsible for everything that touches the DC and Maryland area, including the branches, operations, risks, and supporting our philanthropy.
Wonderful. I know that Marcia Griffin spoke fairly highly of Wells Fargo. I know that you all have had your challenges, but on the ground, I think people do see maybe ways that you've been able to help them to get into a home. And that's your mission, right?
Absolutely. So let me just say this. We had a LIFT program that was in DC probably about 4 years ago. And that LIFT program offered customers about $20,000 in grant money. And we help people get mortgages and pay the down payment. We're very committed to our community and making sure that people have the opportunity to afford homes.
Wonderful. So, I mean, we mentioned tax season. How do we prepare for this? It's February already. We've got like 2 months to really get it all together. What are you recommending folks do now?
There's a couple of things about tax season, and I kind of put it in two buckets. One is, are you anticipated to receive money, and are you expected to owe money? And many people talk about, I'm going to get my tax check and I'm going to pay these bills off. But what we don't talk about is tax season is an opportunity to start building a savings account. For those that owe, how did you budget? Or is it going to be a lump sum out of your savings account in order to pay your tax liability? So there's two different buckets that we can talk about, but I really want to just hone in on individuals that are receiving a tax check this year. This is an opportunity for you to put that up. Inflation over the last 43 years has been anywhere from 3 to 5%. And quite frankly, if your money's not earning at least that, you're losing buying power. That means that that dollar will not have the same buying power tomorrow. An example of that could be some days you can buy a 2-liter soda for 99 cents. Some days it's $1.49. You think about that is inflation in action and in motion. And so you have to be able to make sure that you're sustaining yourself. When I think about financial wellness, it's just as important as mental health and physical health. Getting right, making sure that you have a nest egg. And there's many ways that you can actually start the saving program. One is a little fun thing is to start saving all your change and start with maybe a small cup and then move to a bigger tin and then maybe a bucket. But start saving all your change and cashing it in every 3 months and putting that in your savings account. Another trick that you can do is for any dollar bills in your pocket, put in an envelope, put it underneath your mattress. Not only saving, not only is saving important, but also making sure that we're managing our expenses and our debt. This is an opportunity. January is an opportunity for us to really sit down and set some financial goals for the future and make sure that we are creating actionable steps in order to achieve it.
So when you put that money in that envelope and put it under your bed, how do you resist saying, oh, shucks, my cell phone bill is due. I don't have I know where some money is under my mattress. Right. How do you resist going to that money and spending it on something that you need, right? But you just don't have the cash for at the moment.
Well, part of that's budgeting. And there's a myth out there that only people who have money should budget. And that's not true. There are templates, spreadsheets, electronic devices out there that can help you manage your money. You shouldn't be surprised or have to go to an envelope to pay your phone bill if you're properly planned. And, the real test of that is to make sure that you know what you're spending money on. When you think about a cup of coffee at Starbucks, that's $4. You add that up over a week or a month, that's your savings account. Or do you need to get your car washed every Saturday? Or do you need to go out every week? You think about going out to brunch in DC, it's going to cost an average of $100. You think about that over a month, that's $400. You think about that over a year, you're talking about $5,000. What if you just cut that back to doing it twice a month or once a month and putting the rest in your savings account? Just imagine where you could be.
So is that savings account, John, is it something that you never use? You just consistently save?
No. Okay. No. What I will tell you is if you have an opportunity to have a 401k or 403b, it's an opportunity for you to save for retirement. The gauge is, quite frankly, that if you're in your 20s or 30s, you should be saving about 10% of your salary, your gross salary. If you're in your 30s or 40s, it should range from 15 to 30. And then if you're in your 40s to 50s, it probably should increase anywhere from 20 to 40%. And that's really inclusive of your 401k, which most people are putting on average about 6%. Here's the problem we have. The average American has less than $400 in their savings account, which means that when incidentals or emergencies happen, they have to resort to a credit card or a loan, and that becomes debt. When in fact, we could save the money and prepare for a rainy day. Now, to your point, I always like to use the myth, and this is not something that a lot of people agree with, but in financial circles and in being a realist, I don't think you should spend more than what you have saved. For example, should you buy $1,000 pair of shoes if you have only $1,000 in a bank account? The answer to me is no.
Mm-hmm.
Is no. Why not reinvest that money for yourself? I just think that there's. Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I agree. It makes sense. I just know in reality, sometimes people are, they have that with that start. They try to save that little bit of money. I can talk from personal experience. I think I've matured, and so
Mhm.
I've gotten over that hump. But it did take a while,
It
to
does.
realize the importance. And like you said, it's interesting because I associate with a lot of young people. I'm trying to get them to understand, the importance of, like you said, retirement accounts, being able to save for the future. And that's another question. I mean, when is a good time to really start that? If they're not working, because so many young folks now are creatives, right? They're working for themselves and they're
Mhm.
making money. They're hustling and making money through their art or what have you. So how do they get started in retirement saving?
Oh, absolutely. There's so many different vehicles, and it's hard to because everything's tailored to that individual and where they are in their financial journey. What I
Mhm.
will say is that there's Roth IRAs out there, there's IRAs, and there's also any bank can give anyone financial advice on where to put their money. The one thing that you asked, which I think is so important, is when should you start? You should start early. You should start in your 20s and build on it. Now, there are some caveats to whether or not I think you should save if you have credit card debt. I don't. I think that you should pay off your credit card debt because interest is 27%. The other thing is when you're doing your budget, I highly suggest you pay yourself first. I don't care if it's $1. I don't care if it's $2,
My
but pay
daddy
yourself,
used to say that. Yeah, pay
pay yourself
yourself
first.
first.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Put $5 up every time you get paid because none of those bills would get paid if it wasn't for you working.
Right.
Reward yourself.
Interesting. Um, this has been really helpful information, and I hope that people will take it and actually act on it because this is the time of year when we're making New Year's resolutions still,
Mhm.
or trying to see if we followed up on those resolutions. And I think a lot of people have said that this year I'm going to try to save more money.
Mhm.
The last question I wanted to ask, though, about debt: is there a such thing as good debt?
It all depends. I would say, mortgage definitely is good debt because it builds assets and wealth. It's how people transfer wealth. It's one of the number one vehicles on how we accumulate our net worth. Car loans, I'm just going to be completely honest with you. Cars, people think that they're an asset, but they're actually a depreciating item. If
Hmm.
you try to sell your car, you're going to get less as soon as you drive it off the lot. And really, there's some formulas to that. If you buy a car, it should really be less than 17% of your gross income. So if you're buying a car more than that, you're really overextending yourself.
Wow, that I've never heard before. And
Mhm.
that's good advice as one who might be looking for a car soon. So I
Absolutely.
appreciate that. Yeah. So anything else? We're going to sign off in a minute, but is there anything else you'd like to share with us? This has been great information, but anything else you think we need to know, like right now?
Absolutely. There's a fear of some people to look at their credit. And here's what I would share with you. If you start today in 7 years, you start today with positive behaviors and habits, in 7 years, you can have good credit. Credit changes every 7 years.
Wow, amazing. I had heard some folks having a discussion the other day about if you check your credit, it's a ding against you for doing that. And is there any truth to that?
No. In
Hmm.
fact, you can get one free credit report per year, but there are services out there like Experian.com. You can check your credit often. In fact, they send you alerts if there's any credit activity. And I
Hmm.
think it costs like $100 a year. It's well worth it.
Right. Okay. All right. And don't go under that mattress to get that $100.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
John Allen, thank you so very much for being with us today. We hope that you'll come back. I mean, I always have guests and I always want them to come back because there's so much more we could talk about. But I really appreciate you spending this time with us and giving us some, real basic, information that was easy to understand, not difficult. So I really appreciate the time you spent with us today.
My pleasure. Thank you.
All right. Have a good one.
You too.
So yeah, save that money, you all. Save that money. Find some kind of way so that at the end of the year, remember, Chevry, the old what do you call them, Christmas accounts that you used to have? I used to, I finally learned how to do that, and at Christmas time, that was my Christmas shopping money. And I was so proud of myself the 1 year I did that. It was great. But anyway, we're going to move on. I think Council Member McDuffie is here with us. So I think, well, he's not. I think he's going to join us in a few minutes. So we're going to move on and bring on Michael Tobin, who is the Executive Director of the DC Office of Police Complaints. We're glad to have you on board. Mike, how are you?
I'm doing great this afternoon. Thank you.
So you are a person that most folks don't see or talk to unless they need you, and there might be a lot of people out there who need you that just don't know where to find you. So I'm glad that you're here with us today to talk about the Office of Police Complaints as we look at what happened in Memphis and just incidents not only in DC but all across the country. Folks don't often know where to go to file those complaints. So tell us a little bit about your office.
Yeah, thanks. And thanks for having me on, because you're right. A lot of people don't know who we are or what we do. And I appreciate the opportunity of telling your audience that, because it's an important service that we provide. We're a DC government agency.
See there?
Our office is located right above McPherson Square Metro stop. And I'd like to tell people right when we start off that we are completely separate from the Metropolitan Police Department. We're in a different building. We don't report to them. We don't work for them. We are one of the few DC government agencies that are called independent agencies. And what that means is I don't report to the mayor's office or the executive cabinet. I report to a civilian board that's called the Police Complaints Board. That board is appointed by the mayor and the council, but I work for that board, not the police chief, and not people in the local government. So that makes us independent, and that allows us to do our job without a lot of political interference, and that's really important, I think, for people to know. So with the Police Complaints Board and the Office of Police Complaints, we exist virtually and in person. If anyone ever has an issue with the Metropolitan Police Department or the Housing Authority in DC, their police department, we have jurisdiction over both. And in fact, under the most recent legislation, we have jurisdiction over just about any type of complaint that you would have against an MPD officer or housing authority police officer. So if people ever need to get hold of us, they can just go online. They can Google Police Complaints DC. We'll come right up. It's no problem there. Or they can come to our office. They can come to any one of 20 different community agencies in DC, and those agencies will help them file a complaint with us. But the easiest way, and the way most people do it, are one of two ways. They go online and they can file it right online by pressing a couple of buttons on the computer or on their phone through the mobile application, or they can go to any district station. And when you go to a district station to file a complaint, it comes to our office. MPD forwards all of the complaints that they receive to our independent office, and we will determine whether we're going to investigate it or not. And most oftentimes, we will be the investigating agency to file that complaint. So,
Mike, I'm going to bring on Sam Collins, a
Great.
reporter here at the Washington Informer, so he can join in our conversation. Sam, welcome.
Peace and blessings.
So, I'm glad that we are having this conversation. I know you have been covering several stories in the DMV where there have been police involved, either shootings or what have you. And a lot of people, it's interesting to hear sort of a recent report that was given that I think you all get how many, well, let me ask the question, Mike. On average, how many complaints do you all get a year?
we get about around 800 some complaints. every year that we investigate. So that's in contrast to just about 5 years ago, we were getting about half that number, getting about 400 complaints a year, and that was considered average for many years. But for the past 4 or 5 years now, we've been averaging around 800 plus complaints every year.
And how do you classify those complaints? What would be at the top of the list?
The most common types of complaints, I would say, are two types basically. One is harassment, and there's a whole bunch of things that fall underneath harassment. Such harassment would include things like receiving a bad ticket, a ticket that you didn't think was justified, or being arrested falsely by the police, or having a search of your home or your vehicle that was not justified. Those will all fit under harassment. That's our most common complaint. And then our second most common type of complaint would be language and conduct. That would mean an officer using profanity, or an officer just not speaking disrespectfully in a manner that was disrespectful to the complainant. That'll be the other one. And then other complaints we have jurisdiction over are use of force, failure to intervene. Another typical one that we see is unlawful searches of a home or of a vehicle. So those are probably the most common ones that we see.
Sam?
As far as complaints,
Well, I'm asking you to jump in with any questions you might have, or.
definitely. To what degree, Mr. Tobin, would you say people know about this resource? Because in my reporting, I have come across people who have submitted complaints, but oftentimes it seems like people are taking more to the streets now in their activism and in responding to police malfeasance or alleged police malfeasance.
Yeah, well, I hear it a lot that people don't know about our agency, but what I say in response to that is, we have a public affairs officer that tries to get out in the community, and if anything ever does happen, like I say, almost everybody has a phone, and you Google police complaints DC, and they're going to find us. And I want them to find us because we want people to file complaints. And in fact, the DC Council wants that too. And just last month, they passed a new law that will give us, going forward, authority to receive complaints anonymously even. So in the past, people probably have been hesitant to file complaints because they weren't allowed to do it anonymously. We could not accept complaints unless we had a signed one in our hands. Going forward, once that becomes law after congressional review, and whenever that ends in 2-3 months or so, we will be able to accept even anonymous complaints, and we're working out the details in our software system to do that even online through a mobile application or through our online website.
It's very interesting. That takes me to my next question, which is about accountability. So once the complaint goes in and an officer is found liable, how are they held accountable? And, is there any pushback you've seen from the police union when it comes to that?
Yeah, Sam, and I could talk about this stuff for hours, and I'm just going to hit the big points. One big point on that regarding the police union, effective now going forward under DC Council legislation, since the beginning of time, the police union has had a lot of control over and authority over how discipline is handled by MPD because they have a collective bargaining contract that has to be followed. Going forward, the council has prohibited discipline from being part of the collective bargaining contract with MPD. So they can't be involved anymore in the future with the disciplinary process. And that's been a huge obstacle in the past with officers going through numerous different appeals of disciplinary processes and different procedures and delaying things. And I think eventually when we get it all caught up, that's gonna be greatly improved on that police union piece. The second part of it that I wanted to mention with regard to the police complaints and what we do is we have complete access to all body-worn cameras. So first of all, when we get a complaint in, the first thing we do is go into the body-worn camera system and we save that footage. Right now, footage is only saved for 90 days. That's under DC law. So we want to try to get somebody to file their complaint within the first 3 months so that we can go in and capture that body camera footage. And we can do it even without an officer's name. We can go in and just, if we have the location or a date, we can search 14th and K Street on February 3rd from noon until midnight and come up with every body-worn camera footage that was recorded during that time frame at that location and identify what happened. So that's the capabilities that we have, and that's the first thing we do is preserve that. And then we'll do a canvass of the neighborhood. We'll interview witnesses if necessary. We'll review all the police reports. And if necessary, we'll call the officer into our office for a compelled interview. What that means is the officer has to come into our office and must answer all of our questions truthfully and honestly, or the officer will be subject to discipline. So once we receive all that, if we determine that there's been misconduct, then we have several avenues to proceed. One of them is to just go straight to the disciplinary format where we ask the chief to discipline the officer. But two other things that we use quite frequently, probably about 1 out of every 10 complaints we get, we like to send them to mediation. And that's an independent outside mediator where the officer and the complainant sit down and discuss what happened and try to mediate the problem. And almost the vast majority of those complaints that go to mediation, everybody's happy with it. The officer learns by meeting with that person, with the community member, off the street in a controlled mediation setting, and the person and the community member can express to the officer exactly what was going on and how they felt about how they were treated. Mediation's been a great disposition for a lot of cases when we don't want to go directly to discipline. Another thing we can do that's relatively new we've had it for a few years now, is that if we see that an officer did not have intentional misconduct, that is that they committed I call it an error in judgment, not something that they really intentionally did, that they wanted to punish somebody, say, but it was an error in judgment, then I can send that officer directly back to the police academy for more training in that particular area. Say they gave a bad ticket and they weren't aware of what the exact law was for that ticket. I can send that officer back to the academy for training in just how to write specifically those tickets better the next time.
Mike, I'm going to interrupt you really quickly because I wanted to bring in Council Member Kenyon McDuffie, who has really been entrenched in some of these issues as well, and to get him to join us in this conversation. I know that you two are not strangers to each other. You've shared platforms before. Councilman McDuffie, I think you're off mute. Great. So Mike Tobin's been giving us some great information that who knew as it relates to the Office of Police Complaints, but we know now. And I wanted you to come in and really talk about, some of your efforts. We're all thinking about Memphis and these police officers who, in this case, just happen to be all Black officers and EMS individuals as well. And, if you could just share from your perspective, and I know you've been out at some of these scenes yourself, you're no stranger to going out and seeing what's happening in the community. Where's the district right now as it relates? I mean, could that happen here? Let me put it that way. Could what happened to Tyron Nichols, could that happen here? And we can't hear you.
Let me know if you can hear me now.
Yeah, we're good. We're good. Yes.
So, my hope is that it never happens here. I'd rather not engage in the hypothetical. The reality is our Metropolitan Police Department, unlike a number of departments across cities around the country, has been the subject of federal investigations in the past. I say that to say they've had consent decrees with the United States Department of Justice. In fact, they've had consent decrees with the section of the Department of Justice in the Civil Rights Division where I used to work, in the Special Litigation Section, which over the years has brought about new policies, practice, procedures, and advancements in policing. Here's the reality that we're grappling with, Denise. Tyre Nichols, George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, you name it. It can happen where you don't have the types of relationships between law enforcement in the community that fosters positive interactions such that the police aren't simply showing up, because of a 911 call. They're not simply showing up because they need to pull someone over who allegedly violated some sort of traffic law. What I'd like to see are more positive interactions of the type that I experienced when I was growing up in the 80s and 90s, when we experienced some of the toughest times in violence, opening of drug markets, and homicides. But on the other hand, my first interactions with the police were inside the number 10 Boys and Girls Club at 14th and Clifton. And not because crimes were occurring, because they were my coaches. People like Mitch Creedle, people like Officer Lynch. I saw on a regular basis inside the Boys and Girls Club. We fostered positive relationships that I think really established a sense of trust that in many communities doesn't exist today because of over-policing in Black and brown neighborhoods in cities across the country. So we've got to do a much better job of making sure that the agents of socialization, our schools, our rec centers, our faith community, churches, are providing the sorts of supports and the village that I think communities need, so that everybody isn't calling police as the solution to some of the challenges that we're seeing in urban communities across the country.
Mike and I talked earlier before the show started, and I wanted you to jump in on this too, Sam. But we talked about, the history of the Office of Police Complaints. The fact that, back in the 60s, police misconduct and police brutality was a major issue for those who were not only fighting for home rule for the District of Columbia, but also a change in the department. And so his office has been around for years because this problem has persisted for years. But there's a place now for people to go as a result of that. So what you've experienced, what have I experienced, seems as though it came from some hard working with community people to make sure that there was a place to go when people did have bad encounters with police. It existed when we were kids, and it existed before then. So.
Yeah, no, I mean, look, I'm a student of DC history and DC politics, and many people like you, Denise, will recall that activists, like your parents, like Mary Barry, before he was even on the council or mayor, he was leading an effort to reform the Metropolitan Police Department. And it resulted in some actions that have taken place to make advancements within our law enforcement locally. For years, it was a male-dominated police department, and there were people, women included, who pushed for reforms to open it up to both Black people in the District of Columbia as well as women. And we've seen how things have come a long way. But changing the culture to make sure that police officers are culturally competent to ways to police urban communities, including the District of Columbia, is vitally important. If we're recruiting, primarily from outside the district, and I'm not speaking of the Metropolitan Police Department per se, I'm speaking more about policing generally, given my background as a former prosecutor and a civil rights attorney that has investigated police departments where there have been allegations of a pattern or practice of misconduct. We have to make sure that we are thinking about recruitment, training, and interactions with the public so that they can weigh in to what policing looks like for their community. Depending on where you go, even in the same city, depending on what part of the city you're in, residents may want a different type of policing depending on what they're used to and what they'd like to see. Community policing is key, but even community policing looks different within different communities.
Sam?
I wanted to pivot real quick, council member, and it's good seeing you again. I wanted to focus on your landmark legislation, the NEAR Act. It was very powerful in just in reimagining policing. With us going up to budget season and with the auditor's report, from my understanding, showing that the Office of Violence Prevention and Health Equity wasn't properly funded, what are some priorities that you're looking at in terms of ensuring that the NEAR Act is fully utilized and fully comes to fruition?
Thank you for the question, Sam. You know, as well as Denise and Mike, and Mike knows because part of the NEAR Act included reforms of the Office of Police Complaints, and he's been doing a terrific job there. And I think it was really positive reforms that allowed the public more opportunities to engage around what policing looks like and to file complaints that were investigated to a conclusion. But there were 20 titles and subtitles to the NEAR Act. And the one in particular that you mentioned, the Office of Violence Prevention and Health Equity, it's never funded. It was never established within the spirit and intent of the law. And it called for a comprehensive strategy to address violence in the District of Columbia. And up until this point, we don't have that. We've had some efforts that have been done by the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council, which is to be commended because they did establish a report that lays out some things that could be done around violence prevention. And we need to make sure that the executive is working with the CJCC as well as other law enforcement partners, including our federal law enforcement partners, to implement aspects of that plan. Because ultimately, it is the chief responsibility of any government. Pick your city, USA. It's the chief responsibility of government to keep people safe. And that is my top priority. I think everything that we're doing as a city right now, in fact, now more than ever, should flow from our desire and our duty to keep people safe. Because right now, people do not feel safe. The NEAR Act, there are aspects of it that have been implemented, including the Office of Neighborhood Safety and Engagement. We have to make sure that we're seeing the results that we seek with violence prevention efforts. I know that some of them are bearing more fruit than others. We have to make sure that the resources exist in communities, but that it is not a one-size-fits-all solution. We need to be thinking about sister agencies and their role in preventing violence, right? When I think about violence prevention, I don't simply think about the police department or the Office of Neighborhood Safety and Engagement, Sam. I think about the Department of Employment Services and what Dr. Unique Morris Hughes is doing around the Mayor's Youth Leadership Institute, the Marion Barry Youth Leadership Institute, which is the place 3 decades ago that I learned about conflict resolution in a classroom setting with my peers, many of whom I'm still friends with today. And so what are the opportunities to employ young folks who need jobs to be able to provide for themselves and their families as teenagers or between the ages of 18 to 23? How much more should we be doing to bring that information to people, to create those opportunities for them to be economically secure in an environment where sometimes they feel like prosperity is passing them by?
Councilmember, I want to get Mike back in here in this conversation again, because one of the things that he said that I thought was interesting, if people have complaints, that not only can they contact their office, but you mentioned about 20 other agencies or organizations. Mike, can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. What we do is we reach out to different community agencies and we call them our community partners. And if any, just about, most of the main community agencies in the DC area are our community partners, and they will help people file complaints if they need help doing it, and they will forward it to our office. That's if they can't go on their phone and file a complaint, or can't go to a district station to file a complaint with. They eventually gets forwarded to us or come to our offices. We most complaints, like I indicated, most complaints are filed online now. Just a couple of clicks on the computer screen, and you'll have your complaint filed.
So so there, when you say partners, are they like government agencies, nonprofits? Who would some of these agencies or organization partners be?
There was a mixture of government agencies and non-government agencies, nonprofits, and NAACP DC chapter,
Okay.
ACLU DC chapter, a lot of the DC government outreach agencies are also our partners. So we try to spread our wings as far as we can so that people, when they do need help, that they can find us as easy as possible.
I was wondering, Councilmember and Mike or Sam, as a result of, that office or any of these offices, what can we point to I read something in the report that I thought was interesting as one who wears locks, that there's now some new policy where you can't pull people's hair out, right? I didn't know it was okay to do that in the past. Mike, can you talk about that? But also, what other policies are there that have changed as a result of your efforts, Councilmember McDuffie, as well as what the Office of Police Complaints? What have we seen different in policing?
Yeah, well, I didn't know it was okay to pull hair either until I started seeing a number of complaints of DC officers using that as supposedly a technique to control individuals, and it was 100% being used against young African American males during the course of an arrest. And there was no training on it being conducted by MPD, and it was basically being condoned because it wasn't prohibited. So earlier this year, we put out a policy recommendation that goes to the police chief and the DC Council saying, let's fix this. And that's one of the things we do is we try to look at patterns in complaints. And if we see something like that, we'll make a recommendation to change that policy and procedure. And Councilmember McDuffie, one of the, I think people underestimate the impact of the NEAR Act, that he was really, he spearheaded the whole thing. And some of the improvements that I mentioned earlier in the show before the council member came on, those were a direct part of the NEAR Act that he has spearheaded and we got through. And does it make a difference? Has it made a night and day difference? No, but everything we do is another step forward in increasing police accountability and increasing community trust. Us talking here today is improving community trust because now more people than yesterday knew that we exist and we accept complaints, and you can do it as easy as possible. If something happens, there's somewhere you can go now separate from the police department, and that's the Office of Police Complaints. So it's another step forward, and that's why I appreciate efforts by council members like Councilmember McDuffie, by this show, by reporters like Sam that bring these things out to light, because that's how we get the word out. Is when you asked earlier, Denise, can things like Memphis happen in DC? Yes, they have happened here many times over many, many years, and they've happened in every major city. And as we see from Memphis, they continue to happen. So we got to continue to work on this. We got a lot of work to go, but we are taking a lot of steps that eventually, over time, are going to make a big difference, I think.
If I may, and I wanted to, once again pivot, just with news of the Republican-controlled Congress gearing up to knock down the revised Criminal Code Act. I'm often wondering about, what often happens in government amid discussions about violence and policing, and it seems like we talk about long-term solutions, but people who are under duress, they really can't quite understand the importance, or many of them can't understand the importance of putting things in place to prevent crime. And I'm often curious. I just want to hear from, Mr. Tobin and Councilmember McDuffie, what's the messaging, from both of your offices that goes out to sort of quell people's fears about what they might perceive as, the ineffectiveness of putting in these things in place when they think that more short-term solutions are needed in terms of like more policing.
Well, I think more short-term solutions are needed, and we have to acknowledge the fear that people are living in right now. When you have incidents like what happened at Potomac Avenue Metro Station a couple of days ago, when you have incidents like having 3 people shot, 2 of them kids, ages 6 and 9, on a Metro bus as they were exiting the Metro bus, then it's natural that people will fear crime and safety in the District of Columbia. What I think we have to make sure that we're doing constantly is communicating with the public exactly what's happening, whether or not it is the Metropolitan Police Department stepping up patrols in a certain area as a result of something transpiring in the community, or it is the policies that we put in place that are designed to address the root causes of crime and violence that make homicide the leading cause of death of Black males between the ages of approximately 15 and 34, right? And so it's both and. It's not an either or. We need those short-term solutions that increase visibility, that deter crime from communities where it's happening, both residential neighborhoods as well as commercial corridors. But we also need the longer term solutions. And I think it's important that we communicate to the public that it is a whole of government approach, not simply one agency or another. It's the Department of Behavioral Health, the Department of Mental Health, making sure that we are acknowledging the trauma that so many people live with in the District of Columbia who have experienced violence up close and personal in the form of shootings, yellow tape, blood-stained streets. We're talking about kids in some cases. Mm-hmm. We expect to go to school and learn in an environment where they are hearing sounds of gunshots and really experiencing serious trauma, which is why it's important to make sure that when it comes to education, we're putting the resources inside the schools to support those students and to support those teachers. So we aren't looking at teachers to do 5 different jobs, none of which are related to classroom instruction of students because the resources are depleted or because the kids are coming into the schoolhouse with so much trauma associated with things that happen outside of the schoolhouse. And so we have to look at our education, our workforce development programs across multiple agencies, look at access to healthcare in communities where hospitals exist. We need to be looking at everything that we have to offer as a government, understanding the intersection between economic opportunity and security and public safety in the District of Columbia.
That's interesting you brought up schools because, again, with budget season coming up, I'm just sort of curious about what the discussion is going to be about when it comes to, Mayor Bowser's enthusiasm for ramping up SROs once again. And I'm just trying to, understand the strategy around that, helping her to understand, seeing as though there seems to be some sort of friction between the council and the mayor when it comes to public safety.
Yeah, look, it's not the first time it's happened. I chaired the Committee on Judiciary and Public Safety. There was friction between the council and executive, and I think a certain amount of tension between the executive and the legislative branch of government, which are separate yet co-equal branches of government. I think a certain degree of friction is expected, and frankly, is positive for moving the ball forward to ensure that we're keeping people safe and we're improving the quality of life of residents across the District of Columbia, regardless of where they live and regardless of their income. And so when it comes to public safety and SROs and police and schools, we've covered that area at the council with the phase out that we put in place. And here's the thing, if people want to continue to have that conversation, then I'm open to having that conversation. In fact, I signed up as a council member in order to have those tough conversations about what policing looks like in the District of Columbia and whether the solution is some non-law enforcement safety protocols inside schools that keep students, teachers, administrators safe inside the schools, but allow the police to do their jobs outside of the schools, right? I think it's important that people look at public safety as a comprehensive effort. It doesn't all occur inside of the schools. It's okay to make sure that we are doing quality community policing outside of the schools where police are fostering relationships with students, showing up at their basketball games to cheer them on. And again, not just showing up after one of their friends is shot or arrested for something else, right? Creating those positive, reinforcing relationships between law enforcement and the community is absolutely vital to improving public safety. And I cannot underscore how important it is to make sure that continuous training of law enforcement, but also orienting the public to what policing looks like in the communities happens across the District of Columbia, regardless of what ward you live.
I was going to say, we've run out of time, but who cares that we've run out of time when we, need so much more time to talk about this topic, but we have run out of time. And I just wanted to thank both of you, Councilmember McDuffie and Mike Tobin, for being with us. And Sam, you, of course. But is there anything you all would like to close up with before, we come back? I think this is a conversation that needs to continue, maybe more people at the table to really have this conversation. But Mike, anything you want to close out with?
If you ever encounter misconduct with DC police or DC Housing Police, do not hesitate to contact us. And I explained how and why. We made it as easy as possible. Please contact us. We will help you.
Great. Thank you. Councilmember?
I look forward to continuing the conversation. I want to thank you, Denise, Sam, and it's great to see you, Mike, and all the great work that you're doing and your team is doing, the Office of Police Complaints. But I want to continue the conversation, and I'm willing to offer it. Maybe you can all help me post it at the Washington Informer, but we have to have a broader community conversation about public safety. It is the number one priority for me and my staff to keep people safe in the District of Columbia. I do that as a council member, but I'm also a husband and a father of 2 daughters, and I think everybody deserves to feel safe in the nation's capital, and I want to have that conversation, but broaden it to include our faith community, broaden it to include some of those coaches who are coaching youth sports, broaden it to include some of the teachers and folks inside our schoolhouses, so we can come up with additional solutions to improve public safety here in the District of Columbia.
Well, I say let's talk, let's make it happen. So go beyond the talking, let's make it happen. I look forward to collaborating with you, with the Washington Informer, Sam, and you, Mike, as well. This conversation needs to take place. So thank you too for joining us, Sam. We still have work to do. So I'll see you in a few, but thank you again for being with us on WIN TV.
Thank you. Thank you.
All righty.
Peace and blessings.
Okay, so this is the end. We've gone over a little bit, but I'm glad that you all were hopefully stayed with us. And I thought that was a great conversation, and clearly we're going to have more. We are going to sign off now. I think Chevry has a great Black History Month video closeout we're going to share with you. Please join us next week, same place, same time, hopefully the same sort of informative conversation. And if you have any comments that you weren't able to make on the comments, send them to us at news, NEWS, at WashingtonInformer.com. Again, news, NEWS, at WashingtonInformer.com. Until then, have a great weekend. Stay warm until next week, when I think it gets a little bit warmer, so we'll feel better. But have a great weekend, and we'll see you next week.
Black History Month was created by Carter G. Woodson and the organization, the Association for the Study of African American Life and History, which named the second week of February as Negro History Week. The first one was held in 1926. It wasn't until 1969 that Black students at Kent State University extended the week into a month. And it wasn't until 1976 that that month was recognized by the United States 40 years after its initial conception. The district is adding a new Black-owned eatery named the DC Capitol Square Bar and Grill. Located at 1500 East Capitol Street, the restaurant serves an eclectic combination of African, Caribbean, and American offerings in a bright white and orange decorated establishment. Clayton Rosenberg, managing partner and general manager of the store, said, quote, "Having something that is Black-owned that you can give to a generation of people has been our number one goal. It's a family-oriented vibe with the uniqueness of international food and an ambiance that brings folks together."